Hey everybody, welcome to another Anatomical Gangster, and I'm excited to be talking to the amazing Julian Baker. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Jules.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure and a privilege. It's always a pleasure to have any conversation with you. So you know that.
I'm so grateful for that. That's awesome. Julian, I can't even remember. I think I've known you for at least a decade, maybe more. I don't even remember when I met you. And I kind of feel like I've always known you, but you know, uh, Julian, I mean, your background is so rich with so much science. And I want, before we even talk about what we're going to talk about today in this podcast, because Julian and I are actually collaborating and we're doing a retreat in Greece, and I'll talk a little bit more about it. But will you tell everybody a little bit just about your background, anatomy, and the rest of the things that you have engaged in over the years?
Yeah, I mean, I started out 30 years ago, over 30 years ago, learning something called the Bowen technique, which is really light touch. And I was living in Australia. I was a chef, I was making cigarettes and drinking beer and stuff. And I'd had this neck problem that I'd carried as a result of martial arts stuff since I was about 13. And so we keep coming back, and I have this stiff neck, and I'd get massaged or rolfed or you name it. And I was living with a guy who was a rolfer, and I'd had everything done, cracked, and the only thing I hadn't had was I had one session of acupuncture, but other than that, I was, through the mill of everything. And one morning my neck went, and I phoned this guy up. He was out staying with his girlfriend. I said, "All right, so I've done my neck," and he'd rolled me like I had three full sessions because he was practicing on me. And he said, "Oh, look, when you're in acute stages like that, I'm not going to touch you. Come over and see my girlfriend Julie. She's done this thing called Bowen." So she came over and she sort of poked me gently and walked out the room. And I thought she was an alcoholic or somebody had a bladder problem. I don't know what was going on. And I was really cynical. The whole world was, dog on a rope kind of stuff. If it didn't hurt, I'd already done some reflexology by that stage. And so, I assumed that therapy had to hurt you, right? That was it was what it's for. So when I walked out in the same amount of pain as I walked in. That's something I keep coming back to 30 years later. And
Mm.
um, and the next day I thought, well, that's rubbish. And I went home and I said to my girlfriend, she said, "What's it like?" I said, "I was one of your lot, the woo woo, the touchy dog on a rope, stuff." And the next day the pain had gone. I mean, it had just gone. It's like, shit, what happened? It was weird. And it didn't really come back. And I think I dived into a swimming pool when I was, stoned or something, like about 3 months later, and it went again. And before I could even get back, I'd already signed up. I thought, well, I should learn this. And the course was full. The people that taught it, they weren't going to come again. And I won the lottery. I mean, literally, I won. I said, if I had the money, I'd do it, right? And I thought, well, I can't. It's full, you know. And then they phoned up and they said there's a place available. And I haven't got the money. And they went, oh, okay. And then literally the next day, I won the lottery. Now, not 60 million, because the universe knows I'm too much of an arsehole for that. So it was like $400 or something like that. It was enough to, get my car fixed and go on this class, and that was it. And sort of that kind of weird stuff's happened ever since. And so I learned Bowen and didn't know what I was doing, and so then brought that back to the UK in 93, 94. I had a baby by then, didn't know how that happened, brought her back, and and then sort of plugged away with it for about 2 years and thought, this isn't getting me anywhere, and nobody wanted to know. And so then again in 94 I had this huge article, literally from zero to hero, this article written in a national publication, newspaper, and we had thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of letters. They just kept on coming and they never really stopped. And so that was 94. And then I sort of was doing Bowen, I was teaching, and I was, but I wasn't really satisfied with the explanations of anatomy that I was getting. My anatomy was non-existent. And then, so I couldn't quite work out what was going on. And then around, I think it must have been about 2001, somebody handed me a DVD, and it was Gil Headley's DVD. And I put this thing in. I'm like, wow, shit, that's it. That's what I've been missing. So I booked myself on the first available flight, went out to San Francisco, did his 6 day, and said, "Do you want to come to the UK?" And he's like, "Sure," you know. And as we both know, that people invite you to do lots of things and you never hear from them again ever. And so he's confidently never expected to hear from me again. And I phoned him up about 3 weeks later and went, I got some bodies and I got to. So he came over and we started working together for about 12 years. And I ran my own classes and his classes, and he sort of, I set the class up and he came and taught them, and we went to St Andrews, and yeah, so that's really where I've been. And then in 2016, I started down the road of doing a degree of health sciences, kind of just to sort of formalize and make myself a bit more respectable. And that's changed a lot, really. I just realized what a doofus I've been over lots and lots of things, and that so yeah. So that's me finished literally last year. I think I passed my degree, and so it's a combination now of walking between, like a shaman, walking between the two worlds of 30 years of my life being complementary therapy, touch, putting my hands on people, and the other sort of 15 years of hanging around in medical schools and dissection, and not really fitting in either of those camps in many respects, because there's both a lot of polarization in those situations. And so my goal now is more about how do we communicate where is the gap in communication. And so I call myself a sort of a health science communicator, or an interpersonal communicator. And so a lot of my work has then gone down the route of, when I'm working with people in pain, or working with people in conflict, in whatever way that comes across, it's generally speaking communication about either understanding themselves, or about understanding somebody else, or understanding the world around them. And so that's kind of where I'm moving towards in terms of a health science interpersonal communications.
I love that. So what I'm hearing, and Julian, how I know you also is from the Bowen community, which I
Yeah.
really have always been fascinated with, because it was one of the teachings. I'm not a Bowen practitioner, but when I developed Melt, a lot of people who were doing Bowen said, wow, there's like real similarities with how you guys are working. And I said, Melt is kind of like Bowen without hands on you, that you're kind of doing it to yourself. It's a nice introduction to gentle self-touch, self-care, attuning yourself to what's going on inside your body. And so I've always been a fan of that. And I know that Gil Hadley, for those of you who are listening, if you don't know who Gil Hadley is, he definitely changed the course of my life in giving me a visual, contextual understanding that the stuff that was connecting things actually was an important aspect of the body that I hadn't really considered. I hadn't really even seen it in the situ, in the way he showed it. And it very much changed how I saw the human body, and how I thought of myself as not parts, but as a whole homogeneous system. And I think his teaching still to this day is like, I'm constantly still learning from him, from his somatics, and from the nerve tour and everything. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, knowing you from the science world is kind of where my foundation is with you.
Yeah, thanks. I think this is the thing that my if I had to encapsulate what my issue is, I've got a lot of issues, trust me, but with anatomy is that, here, like you mentioned, the parts idea. Well, it's not just the part. Well, here is a foot, and here is a lower body, or what have you, and this is the name of stuff, and tibialis anterior, and whatever you want to call it, but you've got the name of the part. But more problematic than that is what is it the name of the part of? It's the name of a part of a dead person, and it's the name of a part of a dead person lying down. And
Yeah.
and so by default, that there are no relationships. There is no tension in that structure. This is the argument that I have when people, they talk about sort of biotensegrity. Well, yeah, the bio is bio. There is no tension in the human form, except that comes from the living system, which is a nervous system. And so, when you stand that body up, dead people will fall over. They don't, you can't, dead people can't stand up. And so the capacity for even just standing up depends on the position of your head, or your shoulders, or contractility, or tension, or your butt sitting on a chair. All these things are complicit and implicit in the idea of us having even the most basic function. And so there is the nature of relationship, and intellectually we get that, the hip bone's connected to the thigh bone, but we never really fully grasp that full integration. And so that's anatomy. Now, I don't have a problem with that. I don't want my knee surgeon to necessarily have to know that stuff, but I really have a huge problem when it comes to teaching manual and movement therapists, but be it melters or chiropractors or Bowen therapists, the system of anatomy, which is based on dead people lying down, because that's not what we work on. Now,
Right.
you learn the parts, no problem with that. We will have to have a standardized reference point. And it's why I'm kind of done with fascia, really. And that's it's like, well, we've gone down that same route of obsessing about a bit of tissue that has no function. It is zero function. There's nothing to it at all, unless you factor in everything else. And then it depends on where you are and what you're doing. So this
Yeah, but
obsessive.
I would also say like it can't be nothing because there's nothing in my body that's doing nothing. I mean, why would I have a part of a body that isn't actually function playing some role in something? But I'm with you. Like I always call it
It's secondary. That's the point
yeah.
about the fascia. It's that it's a secondary action rather than a primary action. It's responding, it's not it's response. It's responding later rather than being responsive.
Well, I think fluids pass. I mean, I mean,
Ah,
yeah, like I think that the fluid flow that's
now swap
within
out fluid,
fascia,
swap out fascia for fluid, then
yeah,
fine. And you can change those words are interchangeable. Now change the word fascia for fluid release, fluid movement, fluid massage. Then great. Well, I'm
that's
100%. I
it.
will ride that roller coaster all day long.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's it. Is there's a, I think that one thing Julian hits upon when we talk about anatomy in general is we formulate definitions. And when you try, like with fascia, I feel like everybody became like a fascia fanatic or something, and it was all about the fascia. And I'm saying, well, no, fascia can help inform you on how things connect, because that's why they call it a connective tissues, because it connects everything. So unless, and I like talking about the neurofascial system, saying that if we're going to talk about fascia, you have to have something before it. And so the before it is our nervous system and these autonomic aspects of our nervous system on a cellular level, and how microscopically things stabilize, that our cells need a stable environment to function in. And so the extracellular matrix plays a significant role. But I feel like what happened in the past decade for the conversation of fascia is that it became like this panacea of all things in the body. It was just about the fascia, and talk like, again, using terms, fascial unwinding, and then having people purport that, yeah, the tissue is like unwinding. I'm like a thread in yarn. It's just like unspooling. I don't think
Yeah.
that's how it works, right?
Mm.
So the question is, can we cause an effect in the body and release and create fluid perfusion in regions of the body that oftentimes lose fluid flow simply because of repetitive postures, movements, habits, gestures, and even how we see and view the world. If you're always angry, if you're always tense in your physical body, your emotional body is probably going to mirror some aspect of that, and that can cause problems down the road. So I think it's a vehicle. I think of fascia as more of a vehicle of allowing fluids to move to help regulate the primary regulators of the autonomic nervous
Yeah.
system: stress,
Yeah.
repair, and digestion, right? So
Yeah.
I'm with you on that. I mean, I think that that might be
I think it's
actually,
served. I think it served a purpose, though. I think, like with a lot of these things, when you have something that comes up, it serves a purpose to say, okay, well, here is the thing. It's fashionable. It's fatty. It's giving a story. It's a poorly recognized bit of connective tissue. It hasn't really been talked about. But maturity tells you that, okay, that's kind of cool, and it's still cool. There's a lot of things that are fascia. Epimesium, paramesium, aponeurosis. What are you talking about? It isn't a single thing. So, but when you fixate on something, you have to then be able to move on. And I think the time to move on from it was probably about 5 years ago. And we're still really stuck in that bubble of conferences and lectures and stuff like that. Whereas really we need to be taking a step out and go, right, okay, what else is in here? And you mentioned the fluids, and I think it's a really good example. And the fascia that I'm fixated on, and I have been for years, is the thoracolumbar fascia, in that thick tissue that's in the lower back. So why is this thickened tissue here? Because we need to be stable in the lower back. That's the point.
It's
That
a big space.
it's a big space,
Big
and
space.
and we move from it. So we have much less thickened fascia in our upper body because we have more mobility, and we have thicker fascia in the lower body because we have more stability. And we can translate that into meat. You know, the shin of the beef is going to be more tenderness and harder to cook. But the thoracolumbar fascia in here has all the ingredients to give us stability, but there's a very fine line. And so if we don't move it and keep it hydrated, and let's face it, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about movement being hydration. So if it doesn't get moved because we sit and we don't rotate and we don't stretch and we don't, lift and pick grapes or whatever it is that we do, then it will get stiff, and it will get stiff pretty quickly because all the ingredients are in there for it to be stiff, stroke stable already. And so the idea of fluid, even just force mechanics, gently pressing and moving those tissues and encouraging movement in small ways, in body wide movement, rotational
Mhm.
ways, is what I like about melt, because it's not saying here is an exercise on a piece of equipment that we're doing, which is very linear. It's about creating movement, and fluid dynamic movement. And so, let's focus on extracellular matrix, because, fascia is in inert tissue. It's not cellular because it's been produced by the cells. The clue's in the name, extracellular matrix.
So you guys are all hearing this. Like, I mean, and Julian and I could jam out for 2 hours, 3 hours, just talking about the body and about where these practices are. But what was sort of an interesting turning point is about 6 months ago, I was in where was I? I was in Birmingham, England.
Birmingham,
I was in
Birmingham.
Birmingham, and I was doing an all melt instructor event where we were going over techniques. And I thought to myself, is Julian anywhere around here? And so I randomly called Jules and I said, hey, I'm in Birmingham. And Julian was kind enough to drive like 3 hours to come and hang out with me, which I super appreciate. But in the
3 hours
conversation,
is not 8,000 miles, is it? No.
exactly. So one of the things that I do now every year are these melt retreats, and our melt retreats are, I've just been doing them for so long, and I don't want to say I've gotten bored, but what I want to do is incorporate something new. And because otherwise I'm just regurgitating and repeating the same things over and over and over again. And I always say melt isn't static. I'm certainly not static. I'm always learning and growing and changing and trying new things. And in this last year, I did a melt retreat with Debbie Rosas, who is the founder of NIA, and we incorporated dance and movement and these 5 stages of primal motion into the melt practice. And it was incredible. And then I spoke with my team and I said, I want to do something a little more intimate and on relationships, because for me, especially in 2019, my husband passed away. COVID happened, and then the whole world changed. And I felt so much energy got pushed aside. People got very despondent with one another. And I see younger people kind of struggling. I saw a lot of marriages end. I saw a lot of arguments arise during that time. And speaking with other couples, and the trouble of communication was a big conversation. And I've recently been dating a lovely guy for the last couple of years. And one thing that I think we are very good at is communication skills, communication building. And I've watched him grow. I've watched our relationship strengthen because we talk to one another. We ask questions. We learn about each other's inner curiosities. And we've really developed a great friendship and a good loving relationship. And I thought, I want to do a melt retreat for couples. And we found this beautiful place in Amorgos, Greece, which is a small island off of Santorini. And when I saw Julian, I said to him, I'm doing this thing for couples. And out came this incredible conversation because I was looking for somebody to partner up with, to connect with, and to talk about not just basic relationship stuff, but kind of the like the after dark conversations, the intimacy of it, the connecting on an intimate way and incorporating melt into an intimate relationship. And what I mean by that is, instead of it just being a self practice, to actually use it to create a better connection with your partner by doing melt together. And one of the things that one of the gals who, when I was kind of coming up with this idea, she said, that's how I use it with my husband, because there was a time where he'd be like, oh, my back is hurting me. And I thought to myself, well, I know who's going to be cleaning the kitchen tonight. And I would resent him and get angry about it. And then when I learned melt and he would say something about his back, I would say, well, why don't we get out on the floor together, hon? And I'll help you decompress your back, and let's see if we can make it better. And in that, we became more connected. And then afterwards, I would say, how does your back feel? It feels better. Well, why don't you help me clean the kitchen now? And we would do that together too. And it built a bond. And I thought, that is, it kind of, that's where this
Very cool.
idea came
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
And so when you and I were talking, you started sharing some of these new pursuits that you've been doing
Yeah.
for couples, and not just male female couples, but any couple.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and so connecting. And I said to Julian, maybe we should do this together and bring in your perspective on relationship development and how to connect deeply. So can you talk a little bit about what you've been doing in that world of, I don't even know what we want to call it.
I think there's a couple of things that when we talked a minute ago about the idea of there being stability, and that we can apply those ideas of stability and to relationship. And so we are in a stable, what we might call a stable, loving relationship. You've heard the phrase. And so stability can lead to stiffness because all the ingredients are there. And unless we introduce movement to our stable tissues, then they're going to get stiff. And so what do we mean by movement? We have attitudes and we have ideas and we have thought processes that we brought into a relationship. And if in much the same way that we've grown and matured into our body at the age of 22 or whatever it is, and we don't expect, and sometimes we do, we never expect our bodies are going to change, and it's a shock to us when we get to 45 and go, oh shit, I can't do I can't do that anymore. So to bring those
What
same
is
ideas.
that? What is that lump on the side of my waist that I never saw, and that stuff in my inner thigh? I don't even know where that came from. I'm with you on that totally.
I can't get that. No, how does that? Why do I want to go to bed at 10? What? It used to be people say we're gonna have a party. I'll be, yeah. Now it's like, who's
Yeah,
going?
why can't we start the party at 6 and be
I
done by
haven't.
10:30 so I can still get a good night's
Can
sleep?
we? Yeah, we're all for a rave, but have you seen the time?
Can we do the
The
rave at
band. What do you
4:30?
mean? The bands. When I hear the band's not coming on till 11, I'm going. I'm out.
Oh yeah, I'm
I'm
out of
done.
here. Yeah. The main act comes on at 10.
So
I'm ready to
yeah,
go home. I could
standing at
too.
the bar.
I'm
So
sure
this is the
everybody
thing:
understands
is
that.
that why would we bring those? We bring those same ideas about we're surprised at 45 when we have these things, and we bring these same ideas into relationship. And not just standard relationships, but our own concepts of what we think a relationship should be. And sometimes we can go through several relationships just keeping those same ideas without introducing any movement into our own sense of self.
Mm.
And so there's that. And then also I've been working with couples in relation to how to introduce new ideas about certain things that particularly some of them wanted to play with, and how to communicate that. So introducing movement, introducing whether it be doing a class together or whether it be doing something even more intimate together. What do they want to do? What does one of them want to do? Where's the disconnect? And in much the same way that my life has been walking that path between two worlds, as it were, the same will apply in terms of sexuality and intimacy. I've always known who I am and what I am, but the challenge of communicating that without being shut down or without feeling in some way threatened or at risk or overly vulnerable is really hard to do. And so to be able to negotiate that path, we are all who we are. We all carry something with us that we are frightened to communicate with others. And so really true intimacy comes from feeling safe to be seen and holding a space for others where they can feel safe to be seen as well. And it sounds straightforward and easy, and
It's
when you
so
get there
not.
it is, but it's not. It's, you know, particularly when you've been in a relationship for a period of time, or you've come from a space of judgment in the past yourself, or perhaps there's been
Mhm.
religion, perhaps there's been, you know, whatever it happens to be, that you've come from a space where you go, I can't do this or be this. And so therefore, when you're not able to see yourself, how is anybody else going to see it? And so a lot of it sounds very serious, but a lot of it is done just through some games and through some self-reflection, and it's a lot of fun. It really what I like to bring on. You know, I don't take anything seriously. That's why I ask people to say mirror again.
Yeah, I mean, but I think you're saying a couple of things that are really powerful, because I think a lot of people that I work with, they're in relationship for a long period of time, and they say we lost touch with one another. And what I hear is we stopped talking to one another. We stopped listening to one another, and people change over time. And they're like, well, he just changed and he decided he wanted something else. And it's like, well, before this thing happened and he went off and did this thing, or she did that, or whatever it is, there was something going on in the relationship that sometimes is happening in plain sight. But what you do is you ignore it and you don't talk about it. And I think that a lot of times in relationships, I've actually worked with people where they're having a hard time connecting romantically. I've had clients who say we haven't had sex for years, and I'm saying, well, at what point when you stopped having sex were you like, how long is this going to last? And then a year goes by and you're wondering why you're having affairs or whatever else is happening. And when you get to the root of it, they stop talking to one another. They actually never really talk to one another. In fact, they don't even know what the other person is really into on an intimate level. And I
Yeah,
would
do you know,
bet
there's a
that
buddy
that
of mine
happens
who's
with a lot of people.
a divorce lawyer, and he said to me the thing that he hears in mediation the most, it's like overwhelmingly, you sit down at a table and, you know, that person's lawyer is there and this person's lawyer is there, and the one of them starts to speak and the other one says, and he says, I hear this almost every single time. Somebody says, I never knew that. You know,
Yeah,
they outline their grief or their upset or whatever the trigger is for them, and the other person says, I never knew that, I never heard that before.
that's right.
At that point it's too late. You know, you've gone down. There's already the rancor when you're sitting in a room with a couple of lawyers, and you know, you're probably too far gone with that. But I just think that's a really sad indictment. But it's so easy, and it's like I always say to people, and you've heard me say this before, before you come into a dissection room, you've got to bring your sacred cows in there. We're not going in there to study anatomy. We're going in there as much to study your attitudes about the body,
Mhm.
and the concepts that you have. You know, like I'll say to the osteopaths, if you think the sacrum moves and you're not prepared to offer that up, you know, as an offering to be dismantled, then, you know, I want to know what is you're prepared to let go of. What is it you're prepared to stop believing because the evidence isn't there for you to believe it. Um,
Mhm.
and I think that's the same with ourselves in terms of who this person is and what they do and why they're wrong and why I'm right. How prepared are we to let go of who we think we are and how right we are, and how we can change that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I think that, relationships are difficult. I don't think that anybody who says that my
See, I
relationship is
disagree. I
perfect,
disagree. I
do
really
you?
disagree.
I
Yeah,
think I
and
think
I
they take
used
a
to
lot of
think that.
work.
Yeah, I don't think they do. And I think if you're working, if you're putting a lot of work into a relationship, you probably could do it more easily.
Well, but that's it, is like you have to at least put something into it. And I think a lot of people get rather complacent in their relationship. It becomes the mundane, it becomes the constant. And just how you said, our bodies change. Our bodies change, our minds change, life changes. And every time you think to yourself, everything is perfect, just like this. And then you want to take a selfie and then it's a snapshot and everything will stay exactly like this. And it never does. And things always change and hopefully evolve. So I think that doing this particular retreat is also a bit of my evolution in bringing something even more deep into the practice, is honoring yourself in a relationship, honoring yourself with your partner, and doing things together to connect more deeply. And I mean that on every level, from intimacy to being able to do things together, especially if you've got two polar opposites. Like I've got clients who one of them loves to do sports and swim and is outside, and his wife likes to knit and read books and do Sudoku. So like, how do you meet up? Like, where's the meeting place together? And how can you continue to be playful and grow and connect? And that's one thing I like about what we're talking about in this event, is doing sort of games in a sense, playful elements of making something fun and doing this as a group where you can actually talk about things that may be a little taboo, maybe a little difficult for people to talk to, whether, it is in intimacy. I mean, a lot of my friends are a particular age and they're like, my body parts don't work as well as they used to. And it's not that I don't love my wife, but my penis doesn't really play along all the time. And I said, well, there's something even to talk about, right? Like, do you talk about that? Do you talk about hormone replacement therapy? Do you talk about other things besides intercourse to be playful? Do you do things to relax except for saying, oh, I just take some shots of alcohol, or, I do some drugs? And it's like, no, that is not going to help your penis, like you need to do other things. So I think what it does, or what I'm hoping we're going to do, is open up conversations that may be completely new for people
Yeah.
coming in, but um, not unwanted conversations. I think that there's going to be conversations that arise that, how you said, I never knew that my partner, wanted to be blindfolded during intercourse, or really wants to be sensually touched with light touch on their back, or they like a sensual massage, or somebody likes, when I stretch their hips, or whatever it is. I think that that's sort of those aspects of yourself that I don't know if partners always talk about. I think that that's a really deep part of staying in a long-lasting relationship, is knowing what you both like, what turns you on, what's your kink, what do you
I
like to
think
do
before we
after
get
things?
there, before we get there, that's what going back to what I was saying about vulnerability. If I'm going to say, well, I like to wear my wife's panties when she's out, then there's a whole bunch of stuff around my idea about, how do I get to that and feel safe and in my own vulnerability to be able to know, because I'm doing it when she's out, so I know that's wrong, so, or whatever it happens to be, or I'm having an affair, or I'm, whatever it happens to be, is that point is that we have to get to the point, A, that we feel okay about that and ourselves, and B, that we feel safe enough to be able to share whatever it is that we want to come across. But I want to just take you back a minute, because I think sometimes we use phrases or language which is unhelpful. It goes back to the whole fascia thing, fascia release, or we've had the conversation about what is the core, and so we use words that create an assumption around a truth. And so you said relationships are difficult and they take a lot of work. So immediately what we've got is like difficult work, and who wants to do difficult work? And suddenly, by changing the words, so instead of relationships are difficult, the relationships are being present. Relationships are around us all the time, whatever it happens to be. We think of relationship difficulty as our intimate partner, but relationships are all around us. Not all of them are difficult. So what relationships aren't difficult? And why is a relationship difficult? Why have we assumed that? And secondly, when we say relationships take a lot of work, let's think of different words to say around that. So how about relationships take a fair bit of kindness? Relationships can often require us to be patient. relationships require us to be prepared to give of ourselves, so we
Be a
use the
listener.
work, and this is immediate barriers that we have, and sometimes our language is really obstructive to our capacity to be able to then be okay to accept what we need to do. So I don't want to do difficult work. Screw that.
I love that's why you're doing this with me. So Julian, I'm gonna talk a little bit about one of the things that you have on our list of things that we are going to do, because we do have we're going to be doing melt partner sessions, and what I mean by that is helping your partner to engage in these techniques to refine their practice, but to also touch one another, to understand the difference between, I think, sensual touch and loving touch. And is there a difference, right? And I think that there are so many things that we could relate to it. But one of the things that you have is in the morning melt and movement conversation, one of the days you have setting an intention for the day relating to intimacy, the theme of kindness, how we set our mind to being kind, the scope of this, and how we can create simplicity in this thought. So can you talk a little bit more about that kindness aspect?
Yeah, I mean, behind you, you've got a statue, which is a Buddha. And
Couple of them.
my study and practice of Buddhism for 30 years has been principally, just don't be a dick. You have a choice. Humankind we're called humankind, and the tendency for us to be unkind and groups of people is enormous. We can be real assholes sometimes, and all being kind is just stopping and having a thought of saying, how can I be kind?
Mhm.
How can I create a thought in my head? So I don't know, and we can transform any thought. All suffering only comes from our sense of self, and it's a sense of grasping onto ourselves. I stop at a roadworks and the road's shut and there's a traffic jam and I'm pissed because I'm going to be late. But have a little look. There's guys standing out there in the heat or the rain or whatever it has been, and they're resurfacing a road so that I can drive down that every day on a smooth surface without my car getting trashed by the potholes that have been there for the last 5 years. How kind. And they're doing it at night sometimes. They're away from their families. They're out at night. Sure, they're getting paid for it, but that's not the point. They're out at night. They're resurfacing the roads so that I can drive smoothly. How
Mm.
amazing. How wonderful is that? That all these, the kindness of strangers, Streetcar Named Desire. We go into the supermarket and we got 27 different kinds of cereal that somebody's put there for us to be able to not have to put any effort into picking the one that we like. And so
That's right.
kindness is all around us if we want to see it. It- watch next time somebody comes up and they bring you a plate of food, or you're around somebody, watch what they do. So somebody comes along and here's a plate of food, and the server, the waiter comes along and they do this, and they watch that food come down in front of them. And I challenge you next time to do that. Instead of doing that, you've got all the time in the world to look at that in a second. Look at that person who's just brought you a plate of food. They've just brought you a plate of food. And instead of that, let it go past you and look at them and say, thank you.
Yeah.
Nobody does it. You watch, you
Yeah,
know?
it's reframing, right? You're reframing your whole perspective of your visual and your sensory reception. That's beautiful.
And
Yeah.
the same thing is in our relationships. There are so many things that we take for granted because somebody's going to do or not do, that we stop actually realizing that these are acts of kindness in themselves. And once we stop and notice those acts of kindness, and they are tiny, pick up a bit of litter. And just what is it going to pick up a bit of litter and put it in the trash can, in the bin? Do it every
Mm,
day. And what you do
yeah.
is you contribute to your immediate environment. You don't have to tell anybody about it, but you just do it. It doesn't make any difference to you. It gives you zero time out of your day, but it
Do
changes.
you do you think because I know that you work with couples and trying to help them build better relationships. What do you think is tell me a common communication error, where there's like a game of telephone and this person is
Yeah.
not hearing what this person is trying to say and they're getting defensive, but this person is not trying to you them to death, you this, you that, right? They're not trying to do it, but this person isn't listening to what this person. Have you ever had those encounters with
Oh,
people?
I mean, all the time. I mean, daily. You know, that's the trouble that we have in communication. With that, we're not trying to understand what somebody's saying. We are taking on board what they are saying and translating it into how it affects us. And so I go back to that idea of self-grasping. Me. I wake up in the morning and my first thought is my cup of tea and my bladder and what it happens to be. So it becomes about me. So when you're unhappy and you're saying something that I'm doing is making you unhappy, then I'm feeling that I need to defend myself. And the way that I'll do that is to say, yeah, but you do so and so,
There it is.
instead of actually saying, what am I hearing here? And what is this person saying? And how does it land with me? And letting it sit there. And we react and respond too quickly, too immediately. And the days of the email, we get an email, we go, you asshole, bang, off it goes. It's straight away. We don't sit down. Years ago, we got a comedian called Billy Connolly. I think he lives in America now. And his wife is a comedian called Pamela Stevenson. Anyway, and he told a story on Parkinson, a talk show. And it was a stupid joke. It was a joke. It was a joke he gave, and it was a joke about some guys. A Glaswegian is Billy Connolly, and a welder from a real rough part of Glasgow. And he tells a story like that's some Scottish, and he says a wee fella, his wife died. I won't do the full accent. His wife died. He said, "How's it going?" He said, "I'm going to bury her. I'm going to bury her with her backside, her ass out of the ground." And he said, "Why are you going to do that?" He says, "So I've got somewhere to park my bike." Okay, it's a stupid joke, offensive joke, racist, misogynistic, whatever. This is a daft joke. But he told this joke on Michael Parkinson. And I'm going to say it was probably about 1978, 1980, something like that. So
Mm.
we're going back, we're going back 40 years. And they got a lot of complaints. The BBC got a lot of complaints. But if you think about it, what had to happen was you had to get yourself a piece of paper and you had to get it out. You had to get that Saturday night. You had to say, "Dear BBC, I watched this Parkinson this evening, and I was very offended by Billy Connolly telling a so-called joke that wasn't funny." And then you had to fold it up. Yeah, and it was a Saturday night, Friday night. You had to get an envelope, and you had to get a stamp. You had to get that, and you had to walk to the post office, and you had to put that thing in the post box. It took a lot of effort to be pissed off or offended. You couldn't tell your next door neighbor, but if they hadn't seen it, we didn't have video recorders. They didn't have seen it. They said, "That's shocking. We shouldn't have said something like bottom on BBC." And so the investment in having to be offended and communicate that offense was hard work. These days we are so quick because now we can go, I saw something and I can get on Twitter or whatever it happens to be, and I can be pissed off at somebody straight away. And I can be pissed off at somebody else's on somebody else's behalf, even if I didn't see it. And so the immediacy of that feeling is something we need to look at. So when somebody says, whatever they say, stop. Okay, what's the feeling I have here? And what's my appropriate response to that feeling? And is it to straight off and go and have back at them, or is it to sit back and do that? And so when we enforce that, which we will do in terms of how we communicate, you can't respond. You have to wait. You have to sit. And now I have to
That's
say back
beautiful.
to you what it is I've heard you say.
Yes. And that's a big deal is like, so if I'm
Yeah.
hearing you right, I've done that many times when my husband was fabricating a story and I'm saying to him, my darling, I'm observing a behavior in you that is unfamiliar to me. I'm not sure what I'm seeing here. Can you tell me what this is about? And instantly he'd be like, well, you this and your mother that and your brother this and, I that and you this. And I'm like, okay, go back. I'm talking about this thing right here. I'm observing this behavior, right? So I kind of always being blocked. And I thought, I don't think he's hearing me. He's in a defense mode because he is doing something over there and he's trying to keep it behind a wall. And I keep, realizing it's actually not a wall, it's a door. I'm going to like keep opening it up because I'm seeing you in there. And in some ways, I think that is a part of a lot of relationships is needing to be seen and fully heard and to take that pause when something's been said to you instead of the will you this, right, is to hear words that somebody else is saying and sit with it for a second and realize, when I hear you say that, it kind of hurts my heart because I don't mean to hurt you. I don't mean for you to get angry at me. And they right there is like, instead of, well, you did this to me and that's why I say those things. Instead, it's like, how do those words come to
Yeah,
me
but I mean, I think even sometimes we
big.
need to reframe the language. When we'll hear it often, and I think the big mistake that people say is "you always so and so," and that makes me feel. And by reframing that, by saying, when this happens, this is how I then I then feel. It says my feelings are my responsibility, not your actions.
Hmm.
So you can call me a douchebag or whatever, and I can be really upset. Yeah, but I'm feeling what I'm feeling, and I have to take ownership of that feeling first before I then come back and say that it's your fault that I'm feeling that way.
Right.
That's very different that we normally do. The
Right.
second thing is that I've been teaching groups and holding spaces for 30 years, and not everybody, if I say 11 and 15 is 25, then not everybody gets that. People don't think about 11 and 15 being 20, 14 being 25. They have to think about 20 plus 5 being 25. I'm scrabbling for analogies here. So my job as a teacher is to find out how somebody thinks. Where's their analogies? Where is their way of taking on something in a
Mm,
way that they will then be able to move and own it themselves. If I'm just standing up there, and this was my problem as a kid, I'm teaching you this, I'm the teacher, I'm in school, you're going to learn it my way. Of course, I didn't, so I failed on a regular basis because I couldn't. I just needed to find a way to understand it. And so
yeah.
that's informed me a lot about how I notice people and being in relationships where, like, okay, I'm saying this, but this person has no real grasp of what it is I'm trying to get across. So I'll come at it another way or another way and see how I can frame what it is I'm trying to put across in a way that is then acceptable on that person's level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know that I've heard you say, that do people actually bring their whole self to a relationship in the first place? Like, why don't people do that? What is it that holds people back? And what does it actually feel like to be fully seen? And I think in a lot of relationships, that's really the core of the problem, is that they don't feel seen. The person isn't, their partner isn't really seeing them. And I don't mean just visually. I mean, they're not listening, they're not understanding them, they're not understanding why they're uncomfortable in this situation. I have friends who they have a lot of body unconfidence, and when they're at a party and there's like a pretty girl talking to their husband, they instantaneously get uncomfortable. And then later on, they're like, I can't believe that he sat there and talked to her for 15 minutes and this and that and the other thing. And I was like, do you ever just talk to one another about that? And like, what is it in you that feels vulnerable? Why are you feeling so vulnerable? Because this has less to do with him, and I want to know what's going on with you. And in that, they're like, I wish that he would ask me why I get so angry, instead of, like when we go home and I'm giving him the stiff shoulder, he just goes to bed. He ignores me. And I'm like, yeah, stop and think about what you're saying, right? I mean, you're not communicating at the top of the bar. So by the time you get home, you're like, you're so far away from one another that you might as well be in different houses.
Ownership of expectation is what I call the ownership of expectation, where my expectation of you is what I own, rather than necessarily I expect you to behave in a certain way without necessarily having communicated that. So the ownership of expectation is a just a pit full of nails and crocodiles, because it's like I have this image, right? Sue, I'm dating Sue, and I expect her to wake up in the morning and be, "Good morning, everybody. Let's go and melt, and I'm healthy." And she crawls out of bed and picks her nose, farts, and says, "Screw this, I'm having coffee and going back to bed." And I'm like, what? My ownership of expectation is is
Mm,
is so so broken now,
yeah,
that I'm now angry and I'm pissed at you, but it's me that has that ownership of expectation. So who the hell am I to have that expectation that I haven't communicated with you and carry it around, and then have that so cruelly dashed.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited about the time that we're going to have together. And I think always with any melt retreat that we do, there's so much spontaneity into it because we're really working with such an intimate group. This is no more than 25 couples. I think we have rooms left. So we're just have 5 couples to go. And I feel like the people who are coming, some of them have melted before, but a lot of them are brand new to it or don't know much about it at all. Some of them, the husband or the wife is a melter, but their partner isn't. And they think, well, maybe this will help me to connect with them with this, and so that they understand more about why I want them to do it. And I think that that's really an exciting opportunity for anybody, so I'm super excited to do
And I
it.
want it to be that I don't want anybody to be dragged along and feel that they sort of going to have to spill their guts in front of a group of strangers. That everything is optional. You can, do
Yeah.
whatever you want to do or
That
don't want to
that
do. You know,
yeah,
hang out
that's
with
another thing.
quality.
Yeah, in our event, there's melt partner classes, there's melt movement classes, there's things where you're doing it solo. But the nice thing about any of our retreats is that you can come to as much of it as you want. You can, stay out of it. And there's a lot of downtime where people can explore this beautiful island. So I'm also really excited about.
Black sand. It's all black sand over and it's a volcanic.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And there are like some of the excursions that people can do. They can go for boat rides, there's hiking, there's a bus tour, there's walking tours, and there's all sorts of options. And I think it's going to be a really great event. So for everybody listening, this event is at a place called Aegialis Resort. It's May 30th to June 6th. So
How
just
do
in a
you
few
spell
months from now.
Aegialis there, too? How do you spell Aegialis?
Aegialis
And
Resort.
give me those dates again.
And that's May 30th to June the 6th.
I always, whenever anybody's getting information, I always say, if I have to write it down so that anybody else who's May 30th to
To
June.
June 6th. Exactly. And we'll be going into Santorini for a few days to explore there. I'm coming with my boyfriend, Scott. I've got a couple of great friends who are also coming with their husbands. And so, Julian, I'm really excited to be doing with this. And I've got one last question, because this is a question I ask everybody on Anatomical Gangster. If
Hang on,
you could
before you do that, Sue, and I just
tell
want to
me.
say that I think we met over 10 years ago. I think Washington was where we met originally, and for a conference. And
Yes.
I just want to say that we have got some. Anytime we hang out, there is incredible energy that doesn't last long enough. We just get and we go, and it's great. It's just like fires off. And at the end of the time, it's like, oh, I didn't get enough. And people have said that when they've heard us talk or seen us talk. There's a real bang bang that goes in there. So I'm really looking forward to, I don't think it's forced or pushed, but the opportunities haven't been there. We live on the other side of the earth to each other, so the opportunity to hang out in your space and to you just bounce off that. Anybody is going to want to be a part of that. It's going to be a huge amount of fun.
I'm sure, yeah, I'm sure it's going to be a ton of fun, a lot of laughter, and dare I say, probably some tears as well. I think it's going to be,
Uh,
yeah, really exciting, really fun.
anyway, your AG
Yes.
question.
So my AG question to everyone is this: if you could tell someone something that you've learned in life that somebody might not know anything about, but if they did, it might change their thinking. It could change the very course of their life. What is it?
Um, it's not going to be as bad as you think. You know, that thing you're hanging on to, it's okay. It's not what you think it is, you know. And I think that's it for life, is that we hold on to fear, and we hold on to, and you follow that through, and then, well, what if that happens? What if that happens? And when you come to the end of it, you know what? You've got to live your life, and it's taken me quite a long time to get there, I'm going to say.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it's been a while, and it's recent. I'm not a spring chicken anymore. It's recent that I would say that I felt fully seen in my life, simply because I hung on to so much fear and so much shame and so much guilt, and that was reinforced by everything and everybody around me. So and it was only really me that was able to let go of that.
It's beautiful. Yeah, I think that life is short, and if we can love ourselves and love one another more, I think that life is not so, you don't sweat
Yeah.
the small stuff so
What's the
much, and you
question?
can be yourself. You can be who
Yeah,
you are.
what's the problem? And the answer to it, I think the Chicks had a song that was more love. What's the answer? It's more love.
I
It's
love.
very rare that any question or any problem that you come up against where more love isn't going to be at least a part of the solution.
That's right.
I know that sounds very flaky, but really,
That actually is very powerful because yeah, you find solutions through being loving and uh showing kindness. I think we've said that a few times, so I'm totally with you.
it's so easy to be hateful, and right now around in our world there's so much hate and anger and polarization, and it's that's easy. You can just flick a switch and everybody's gonna pile a bunch of hateful shit on you in a moment for anything,
That's
and
right.
we just need a little bit more love.
Well, on that note, Julian, I cannot wait to see you again in person. I know it's so exciting. It's just a few months away. So again, if you're interested in coming with us to this Greece retreat, I'll make sure to leave all the information in the show notes. You can also go to meltmethod.com, click on the events tab, and you'll know more about this beautiful event. We're going to have a ball.
Gonna be awesome. Cannot wait. Thank you
It's
for
going to be.
Sue. You're a genius. You're inspired. I love you to pieces, and I will look forward so much to seeing you in the beautiful island of Greece.
Thank you. Thank you. And for those of you guys listening, make sure that you click the subscribe button, share this with your friends. And until I see you on the next Anatomical Gangster, keep your mind open and stay healthy. We'll see you soon.